Child Abuse Task Force comes under fire. Good evening. This is CTV News. I'm Denise Douglas.
And I'm Byron Scott. A Greenbelt man has filed a complaint with the state alleging that the task force created to examine how child abuse cases are handled in public schools is in violation of Maryland's open meetings law. The task force was created in the aftermath of the child pornography case involving Deontay Carraway, the school volunteer accused of victimizing 19 students, some as young as 9 years old, on school property. Colin Bird filed the complaint saying the public should be allowed in all task force sessions under that law. When asked whether the public should be allowed into those sessions, County Executive Sharon Baker had this to say.
I think the decision that was made by the school system was to make sure that they had confidentiality of the information that people were giving them. And, Dr. Dukes has done this type of task force before. The public will be very pleased with the outcome of it. And I have all the confidence in the world of the task force and Dr. Dukes' ability to do that.
The task force has announced it will take input online on the school system's website until April 15th. Well, domestic violence advocates and survivors receive an upset today when a bill that would expand the definition of abuse is killed. House Bill 1396 would have included harassment and malicious destruction of property into the state's domestic violence law. But the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee tabled it. Delegate Angela Angel, who sponsored the bill, says she won't stop fighting for its passage.
Why didn't you offer any amendments? Why didn't, if I said many times I was open to any language that needed to be done to get these protections in place. So I will continue to advocate. There are 4 days left in session. Things have happened where language is still able to get out on much lesser things, and so there's a hope that people will really step up and advocate for these victims and provide those protections. So we're going to still keep fighting.
The issue was that as much as he was breaking up my phones and things and trying to be intimidating, I couldn't get a protective order because of the child we had in common. It took him trying to kill me in front of my children 2 weeks before I started that job in my kitchen that allowed him to be arrested and then for the rest of the things to take place.
Now, the measure would have required also that the State Board of Education incorporate lessons on abuse in schools.
In politics, early voting for the upcoming primary here in Maryland starts in a week. So you may be wondering what you need to know or where to go to cast a ballot. We spoke with the Prince George's County Election Administrator, who says there's also something new that voters will be using.
Election officials are expecting a big turnout for this year's primary.
Between 45 and 50% turnout, so we will be prepared.
And is it primarily because of the presidential election, or?
Well, we definitely think that the presidential election and the debates and there's just a lot of interest in the varying candidates on the ballot.
That's why Alicia Alexander, the elections administrator for Prince George's, is encouraging people to vote early, which you can do from the 14th to the 21st.
And it's an opportunity for voters to vote at their own convenience, and that's one of the benefits of early voting. If you have other commitments, you can still vote.
One new thing that voters will use this year is the paper ballot.
Well, the General Assembly actually in 2007 passed a law to say that that all Marylanders should vote using a voting system that had a voter verifiable paper trail.
With that said, Alexander also points out that it may be a good idea to review the candidates and issues on the sample ballot before heading into the polls to help prevent any delays or lines.
There are 8 early voting centers, including Bowie Gymnasium, Suitland Community Park School Center, and Upper Marlboro Community Center. Meanwhile, the heated race to fill retiring Senator Barbara Mikulski's seat is way too close to call. Tonight, we continue our sit-down with Congresswoman Donna Edwards, a 4-term progressive who says she'll offer a unique voice on the Senate floor.
I think that
Representative Donna Edwards is on a mission to become the first African-American woman to represent Maryland in the U.S. Senate. Like Barbara Mikulski, she says she'll be a fighter, starting with students, especially those most underserved.
The more we pretend that we have the #1 schools, the less likely we are to address those gaps.
Achievement gaps, an area where many of the state's jurisdictions are lagging behind.
I think we should have neighborhood schools that provide wraparound services, social services, and community services so that they become a support system in a way for the students and the parents, and also for the educators in the classroom. Reducing the class size so that our educators have the ability to look to see what the needs are of individual students. And lastly, making sure that we begin to offer a vocational and technical training in the K-12 years.
When it comes to addressing rising tuition rates and skyrocketing student debt, Edwards says she backs President Obama's idea of free community college.
Or even just think about it, not community college, but think of the first 2 years that the taxpayers help to offset that, because whenever you make an investment in education, it pays back multiple fold. And then we're talking about parents, many first-generation parents, and students who would just have to worry about getting those 2 years of college paid for. And then I think we have to look at the way that we consolidate loans so that students get the benefit of an interest rate that is fair and reasonable and matches their ability to pay.
Edwards, who's in a tight race with fellow Representative Chris Van Hollen in the Democratic primary, says she supports a comprehensive approach to criminal justice reform.
Things like law enforcement training, increasing funds for community-oriented policing so that local law enforcement have the tools and the resources to be able to work with and engage in local communities. And part of the reason that I've expressed support for the Black Lives Matter movement was because I think it was important, particularly for a group of young people, to be able to raise these issues about how to reduce our rates of incarceration, how to improve law enforcement and connection to communities.
She also says more can be done to fight the lingering foreclosure crisis.
I think from a public policy standpoint, I've always wanted to see and continue to support the idea that homeowners should be able to renegotiate the terms of their mortgages in the context of bankruptcy. I would still like to see our ability to get that kind of legislation on to the next president. And I think that we have to tighten up some of the consumer protections in Wall Street reform.
When it comes to public transportation, Edwards says safety is paramount.
I believe that it's an obligation of the United States Congress to provide for operational and maintenance funding. And as a United States Senator, I would be a top advocate for the metro system, both for its safety, but also for its operations.
Whoever wins the Democratic nomination will be heavily favored in the November general election, since Maryland is historically a blue state.
And you're watching CTV News. I'm Byron Scott.
And I'm Denise Douglas.